Ready.
Hi, this is Megan with My Discovery Destination, and we are on today with Parent Conversations. And we have again with us Michelle Linford from Epic Deliberate Digital. Thank you, Michelle. We appreciate it. And I've learned a lot in this series on digital wellness. Today's specific topic is digital citizenship, unless I have it wrong.
Actually, that is the next one in order, but we've swapped it. So we're doing media literacy today.
Okay, so today's topic is media literacy. I'm glad I just kind of had that little inkling. I should double check, so I'm glad I did. We're going to go turn the time right over to her. And as normal, if you have questions, raise your hand, unmute yourself, and offer the question verbally, or put it in the chat. Michelle, take it away.
Okay, let's jump right in with the screen share. We hope we can get this. So good. Can you see that?
Yes.
All right. As I said, today's topic is media literacy. This is one of our favorite topics. So it's a jam-packed day today. I'm looking forward to it. And because of time, I'm not even going to go through. You'll just see what our outline is as it unfolds. But we will start with our usual check-in. This is directly related to the topic today. In fact, you can see that I put it on the title slide, even the same image. This is a chance to just take a minute, just take a few moments, and how am I feeling today? If there were 3 words to describe that, you can write them down or just mentally list them. But being able to name what's going on inside of us is actually an important part of media literacy. So I'll just give you a moment for that. Would anybody like to share one of their words briefly?
I guess I can. Actually, I feel kind of hopeful this week.
Oh, that's lovely.
Yeah.
I always feel nervous as we get started with one of these. As much as I love the content, every time we start a discussion, I'm nervous when I first begin.
I think that's pretty normal. Whenever I have to speak in public, I'm the same way until I get started talking, and then I'm good. So
then we get into the flow. But
yep.
We also always start with a check-in, pointing back to what we talked about last week to try to bring that continuity. So last week we talked about well-being, plugging in, paying attention to how we're feeling when we're using tools. So you can see this check-in actually directly relates to many of what we're doing, many of the topics we're discussing, and just the concept of digital wellness overall. We also had a really, I think, a useful tip from Better Screen Time to make a task list, assign jobs to each device in your home to help create boundaries. I think that's a great activity to engage in as a family. And we always share the links to the digital wellness survey. And now we have a second one that we've been sharing, the social connectedness survey. But as we've been doing the last few weeks, I also just want to open it up to any digital wellness experiences or insights or successes that you've had this week. Does anybody have anything to share? Okay, let's move on. As I said in the intro, we are flipping the last 2 topics today. So we've aligned this to go with the digital wellness survey. Digital citizenship is the last topic in the survey, but media literacy really lays an important foundation for everything. As you can see, we have it embedded in the model at multiple places, but it is very connected to digital citizenship. So we wanted to lay the foundation first with media literacy. And our hope with today's discussion, I'll just be upfront, this is a very content heavy day, but I'm hoping that we can expand your thoughts about media literacy, start going out, but then by the time we finish, to have simple, to bring it back to simplicity. Media literacy is a very broad topic, very multifaceted, and sometimes can be overcomplicated. And so I'm hoping that we'll be able to, that you'll leave here feeling like, oh, I can wrap my head around what this can look like in a really practical way. So a thought question, or if any of you have any thoughts to any responses you want to share, can you think of a part of your life that hasn't been shaped by some sort of media? As I really put myself to this question, I thought, if I really think about it, everything in some ways has been touched by some form of media. So I will ask a discussion question. What does media literacy mean to you? When you hear the term, what do you think of?
I think of, where do you find the truth, the unbiased, not opinionated truth? That's what I think of when I think of media literacy, and I might be way off.
No, I think that's a really great summary, and I think that ties into how a lot of people experience it. Thank you. Anyone else? So keep your thoughts on media. Keep your thoughts on media literacy in mind, and I'd be curious to know if you have any additional thoughts by the time we're done. I'm going to share our technical media literacy definition, that it encompasses how we access, analyze, assimilate, act on, and add to the pool of. You'll see various combinations of these ideas. But again, by the end, we hope to help to even make it more simple than that. You can see, like I said, that many people have their definitions, and I've put this in the bonus section. When we're talking about digital media, since this is a digital wellness course, it's important to keep in mind, and we talked about this a little bit with the attention economy, but just as a review, so much of the media messages that we experience in the digital world in particular are constructed to elicit emotion with the intention to make money. Profit and power are often motivations for constructed messages. So in the digital world, we have ads in multiple media forms, not just digital, but when it comes to the digital world, ads and algorithms combined to have a very large impact on the digital experience. And algorithms prefer and feed off of and tend to feed us more emotionally charged content. Then it becomes customized charged content that perhaps we didn't have quite at the same level. We still had targeted ads coming into our mailbox, sometimes even based on demographic and other information. But the digital algorithms make it so that we get even more emotional charge delivered right to our screens multiple times a day if we're on screens. And it's important to remember that just because something is liked or shared a lot, or not shared, I think there's a typo there, doesn't necessarily make it, to your point, Megan, true. Multiple likes, multiple shares, these are just indicators of how many times it's passed somebody's screen, and they've, a like can be so meaningless, really. Years ago, I did a presentation, and I asked people to compare the number of likes on the Oreo page versus one of their most favorite influential people. I think when I looked at it recently, it's in the tens of millions for Oreos, and this favorite influential people can be in the hundreds of thousands and maybe a couple million, but it's not an accurate reflection of truth. And I've mentioned the social dilemma here. I encourage you to watch it if you haven't yet. So why does media literacy matter? Let's take a few minutes to talk about that. You can see if we were to lift off the different sections of our model that bring in media literacy, we start with the core. We start with using media or reflecting on the media that help define who you are. This can sometimes be called touched on media, that when you interact with the world, you go back there as part of your compass, part of your center, part of your principle base that helps you understand your who and your what and your why. We've also got media literacy embedded in the section around, right before, as we're trying to discern and understand more about wellness, mental and physical, about honoring time, about relationships. There's a lot of information out there. And it's, we, Epic, we don't want to just tell you what to think. We're inviting you to think about different concepts and trying to give you resources so that you can do more of your own research on things that interest you, and to learn more and expand your knowledge, and then go back to your center and say, what resonates here? What do I want to bring back home? And then at the outer level, as we become more well and more centered, that prepares us and helps us be more ready to be able to engage in our community, as citizens, in the process of democracy from a more centered place. And so there's some order to our view of media literacy, that it really starts at home, in the heart, in our hearts and minds, and then branches out. And here is reflecting more of that center. It isn't just about information and data either. It can be about enriching our lives, like appreciating the arts. Media literacy isn't, in today's world, it's become quite politicized, actually. But media literacy is an older field. It's been around for decades, and actually in concept, it's been around for a lot longer than that. And it can apply to any form of media, in the sense of also being able to enrich our lives, not just help us understand or, sift through misinformation. It's also about understanding our world and the human experience as well. I'm going to, Megan, as we finish up, I'll send you a link to this discussion that I had with my son, who talked about why touched on media are so important, and ways that we can build on that center. I re-listened to this again last night, and I didn't ask him just because he's my son. He just has some great insights, and I would highly recommend taking some time to listen to that.
Perfect. Sounds good.
One more, just a few more thoughts. Why does media literacy matter? In principle, like I said, it always has. So just throw out a guess. This first quote: they get exploited every time and never really learn. What era? When do you think that might have been said? Just take a random guess.
I'm guessing the late 60s. I don't know.
I think that's a great guess, actually. This is a translation of something from Paul. So it was actually, 40 or 50 AD.
Okay.
Yeah, right? 1 Timothy 3:7. I think the translation that's more familiar is ever learning and never coming to a knowledge of the truth. But there was a translation that kind of matches. I'll jump to the bottom one because that one matches to that concept, saying youth and adults need empowerment to combat exploitation and build value-driven habits. You can kind of hear the more modern language there. That was in 2020 from Wired Human. I mentioned them last week. All right, so the one in the middle: we are drowning in information but starved for knowledge. What would be your guess?
That one sounds a little more familiar to me, so I'm wondering if it's like from the 90s.
Close. It was 1982 in a book called Megatrends, but before the internet. So this is really a human experience kind of thing, to sift through what we have around us, messages in any form, whether it be written or spoken. Media literacy isn't often discussed in terms of actual conversation, but the principles or relationship, the principles of media literacy can apply across the board, whether it's man-made media forms or our voice as a medium, or the thoughts that we have when we talked about mental wellness. Our thoughts can be a medium that we need to sift through, so we need to be literate with any messages coming across our lives. Okay, so we started with the question, what does media literacy mean to you? Last week was Media Literacy Week in the United States, and actually at an international level. It was celebrated. They bring together different resources and speakers, and I read a report from Australia, or at least I actually didn't finish. I read probably a good first half or so, and ran into a couple of interesting quotes. One person said, media literacy sounds so formal. What else can it look and sound like that speaks to different people? Although media literacy is an important framework for responding to media, the use of the term itself might not always be useful in community contexts. For many, media literacy is an unfamiliar term, and community members might not be attracted to programs and activities promoted via the term. And this is something that we've run into when we first started to promote media literacy, because it's such a powerful framework and principle-based skill set. We were surprised at some of the resistance that people have to media literacy. We like to use the term because it's an actual field. It has decades of study and expertise behind it. But as they say here, it can sound formal. And for some, because the term has been politicized in too many settings, some people are leery of it, because sometimes people will talk about media literacy in terms of the ends or the outcomes that they want to see. Be media literate so that you think this way. That actually violates what media literacy is about. Media literacy is about sifting through different information and then making your own choice based on your own values about how you want to respond and how you want to engage. So we're going to have a little exercise here. This shows a picture of me sticky noting, brainstorming different terminology for the concept of the start with your center, where we began in our digital, just trying to find different terms, different language, different ways that people talk about this concept of starting with your center, so that we can find language that resonates with different people. Because maybe the concept values driven maybe feels, may not resonate with some people. Maybe it feels like it has more of a religious charge for some. And so, all right, if that doesn't resonate, what are your synonyms for values driven living, for starting with your center? We want to do the same thing with media literacy. So I brainstormed a few potential synonyms or reflections of different elements or different ways to think or talk about media literacy. And I'd be interested to hear what resonates with you at the moment. Oh, we've got a chat comment. English, reading, writing. So Jan's sharing some of the synonyms that come to mind for her. Keep sharing if other thoughts come. All right, so media literacy is an action-driven concept. So you'll see that there's some action verbs in these synonyms or elements. Conscious and curious content consumption and creation. I had to come up with something that had some alliteration. I do love alliteration. Critical thinking. Many people talk about media literacy in terms of that skill, critical thinking. It can include, like in our definition, we use the word access to, but access to, reflection, reception of, reflection on, and relaying of ideas. So it's this whole picture of from start to finish. You access information, you process it, and then you do something and engage or not. You choose to whether or not you want to engage around ideas. Like I mentioned before, it can be about music and art and theater appreciation, literature appreciation, understanding, and creation. So it can be very, very focused, and or at least can include the experiences around the arts. I think we all can relate to this one with careful consumerism, since ads are such a primary media form that impact us. Deliberate information, attention, and behavioral management. Again, here this captures more of the whole. Jan says communication consumption. Yes, that front end piece is so understanding how to consume messages, and communication is so key to media literacy. And we've been talking about the attention economy. So I wanted to get attention in there. How and where am I paying with my attention, and how is that impacting my behaviors? Jan, this gets to kind of that whole process of here we consume communication and we're also extending communication. So that back end piece of it as well. I wanted to add this because if we're looking at different mediums of communication, of message, the relaying of messages, it's valuable to understand the specific nature of each tool. So we'll go to digital tools for a second. If you think about Facebook, what's one of the primary media forms? One of the primary, it's more. We're not going to play what the teachers think. Guess what the teacher's thinking. In Facebook, words have a lot. Words and links are more heavily used, say, than in Instagram. So what's the primary form in Instagram? Instagram is mostly image-based with some words, but the first tool, the first media form is the image, the picture, something visual. And so different media have different facets to them, and it's valuable to understand. TikTok, what's its primary media form?
Video. And the same could be true of if we understand art and how it works, or poetry, and we'll show a couple of examples in a minute. Media literacy encompasses informed citizenship, so being involved in civic ways, and we hope informed ways. It's also this inside out living, the capacity for agency driven living regardless of external forces. If you think of our original, when we share our model of digital centeredness, when we start it, we show all of those external forces, the waves of energy and messages that are constantly pressing on us. Media literacy is a principle-based skill set to help us learn to live from the inside out, to be deliberate and awake in how we're engaging, to claim or reclaim our agency. Let's think about literature and the arts. And it can also be, the more literate we are, the more we can talk about and explore the human experience. So again, this isn't just about politics or social commentary or cultural understanding in the present. It can be exploring the human experience across the ages and or in our current world as well. We've seen this word exploitation show up. It can be exploitation prevention, building on a desire for data-driven discernment. I think that can be an element of trying to understand truth, like you said, Megan, not just opinion, but trying to understand more objective truth through data as one media form, as one form of information. And media literacy involves and encompasses fluency in our own emotions and sense, and being aware of how our senses are being engaged and sometimes manipulated by different messages. So as you look over that list, is there any
is there anyone or that maybe stands out to you more that's like, oh yeah, that's a different way of saying what I see media literacy as being, or what matters to me right now in terms of engaging with media? Can you think of any ones you'd want to add to the list? I know we have a small group. Jan says, I like discernment. So when we have a small group, silence is always acceptable, but I also always want to open up opportunities for you to share any thoughts that come along the way.
Yeah, I like the discernment one. I like understanding. I know up here it's listed under art, form, and appreciation stuff. But I think for me, thinking about literacy, I'm like, oh, maybe it is just like understanding what is being taken in. And it kind of goes along with the truth, like, okay, I'm understanding what's being said and where it belongs in my frame. So, you know, hey, this is something that's true. Oh, this is somebody's opinion. This is some good information. This is fiction, you know, things like that. So kind of sorting,
So
understanding the sorting.
yeah, so we could say maybe classification would be another word we could add somewhere. Understanding could have gone in a lot of different places, but I like that. Understanding and sorting. Did you say sorting?
Yes.
Yes, sorting and classifying. Where does understanding and landing was the first thought that came. Like, where does this land in my world? You know, where I want to put this. Does it
And
have
Michelle,
a home?
yeah,
Yes.
Michelle, for me, that goes back to the core media, because, you know, there are certain media that shape my life and how I discern truth and where I want to stay and live. And so I put that lens on when I look at other information coming in. Does this relate to what I've already, you know, committed my mind to and my core to? So yeah, I just think it's so fascinating that this media literacy is just kind of a constant thing, and we're totally inundated because especially of the internet and this massive attention economy and information age with more and more stuff. But we just have to keep going back to, how does this fit with what really grounds me in life?
Yes, and I think that relates so much to what Catherine was saying, the same kind of thing, that it's active and it's again, media literacy sometimes can be twisted to say, I want you to build this skill so you can think more like I do. That's not what it's about. It's in a sense very values neutral. And then we engage it based on, that's why in our model we start with that core, because then we can come back. And that's exactly what John talks about, why it's called a touchstone, that we bring things back into that inner core base of, okay, who am I? What am I about? What kind of person do I want to be? How do I want to show up in the world? What's my why for my purpose in life? And how does this match? Am I going to assimilate this? Is this helping me understand more about what matters most to me? Or is this something that I can put to the side because it's really more either frivolous noise or something that that's not settling. It's not landing.
And it seems like there's a huge imperative in all of this to either pull us towards chaos or to bring order to us.
Oh, see, if we were in a live thing, I would be putting these up on the whiteboard. Megan, would it be possible for you to write down? Actually, we can.
Yeah, Jan, stick it in the chat.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. If you can add, let's put what Catherine said. Understanding and
sorting.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that.
I did too. Just great thoughts. Yes.
I was going to add something if Jan was done.
Yeah.
Most of the bullet points are things that we are trying to do, trying to, kind of form ideas around and use different ways to, filter things. The one that stood out to me was the only one on the list where we're trying to avoid something, and that's exploitation prevention. If nothing else, if we don't learn anything, we don't use the information out there to form an opinion, we ought to at least be educated enough not to let ourselves be exploited and damaged.
Yes, it is a protective factor. And in fact, we've talked to prevention scientists who say that sometimes media literacy experts are brought into their conferences or they present or have booths at their conferences. Media literacy is known to be a protective factor for behavioral health, for public health, and for personal well-being. So yes, in fact, that's why 2 of those 3 sample quotes focused on that word, that in fact, simple wired humans, they talk about this. Their audience is parents, but they want to reach youth and help youth understand. Youth resonate with this idea, like, do you want to be exploited? Do you want to be exploited by the media? Then, start with your center and be alert to the fact that there are people out there trying to manipulate and exploit you. So agreed. Thank you for spotlighting that. You can see that we could have a discussion just on, because I'm sure that there are other, again, this was just a starting point, just to show that there are different ways we can talk and think about media literacy if the language of media literacy itself doesn't resonate, or because it doesn't always. Or if you want to reframe it away from some of the way media literacy is sometimes hijacked by, other agendas. And just a note that I've already said, remember that not all messages we're sifting through come from external sources. When we talked about distraction in an earlier module, a lot of times distraction comes internally from what's going on inside of us. So we can also build literacy around our thoughts and emotions and how we use our very literal voice, or how other people do as well. The concepts of media literacy apply in any kind of communication, even though when we talk about media literacy, it's usually about man-made, human created media forms. Okay, so here's an example.
Michelle, that
Yes.
just reminds me of young parents. I've heard them use this phrase that I never use, but I think it's really intriguing with young children getting upset or whatever. They'll say, use your words.
Yes. That was one of the things I would say to my children. And that goes back even to the check-in,
I think
right?
it's cool.
Use your words. Yes. Yes. I love it in
Yeah,
this context though. Yes. Use your words. We all can grow in that capacity too, to be more fluent and literate and articulate in expressing ideas and thoughts and feelings in constructive ways, which can help.
Yeah, so that's a great way to explain to little children this whole sequence. You've got information coming in, and now what's happening inside of you and what's going to come out of you to add to this conversation or whatever.
Yes.
You use your words and kind of, but it's a fun thing to teach little kids this whole concept.
I'm going to skip ahead, actually. If we were to sum up the principles of media literacy, we could go back to this Viktor Frankl quote. We have stimuli, and media literacy is about creating that space inside as we choose our words or response, or to Catherine's point, where we're going to categorize it, sort into our, or reject from our construct of life, like you said. So this really gets to the principle of media literacy. So thank you for that. Use your words. All right, I'm going to flip back to just give a couple of examples of different applications of media literacy. Art is an example. So does anybody know the name of this painting? I didn't before I learned about it, so don't feel bad. but it is a fairly famous painting in art history. Some say it's the most discussed piece of art from art history. It's called Las Tres Meninas. It's in the Prado Museum in Spain. My husband and I were older single adults when we got married, and we were young professionals, and we both spoke Spanish. We decided, let's take this opportunity before, kids come. And so we went to Spain, and we went to the Prado, and we saw this. And when I first saw it, it was like, okay, that's painting. I was ready to move on. It was, it didn't really speak to me. The room is kind of dark. It's about royal people, it's not my life. But then when it was explained to us, we understood why this is such a masterpiece. Motion is reflected here as this person's leaving. And you see the king and queen reflected in the mirror. And this is actually also a self-portrait of the painter. And there were just, and oh, this is a beautiful piece. And we bought a print because someone explained more, because we were able to become more literate about this piece. It became more meaningful. And that can happen with so many different kind of art forms. Our invitation for the week will be to do the goose chase, the beta goose chase activity that we created with Shirley's help with My Discovery Destination. Thinking about media literacy as a discovery process. One of the activities is to do an art appreciation activity together as a family. Here's another art form example that expands into the exploration of more of that shared human experience and engaging our senses. Of course, art, I could have marked multisensory and emotional fluency on this is not meant to be a science here, just an exercise. But we are doing what we call a digital wellness unsummit. And we've invited people like my son to do presentations and discussions, and we invited an English professor to do a discussion on poetry and spirituality. Spirituality meaning that connection to something bigger than ourselves, not necessarily just tied to religion, but the spiritual experience of the human, the more transcendent experiences of humans. And he shared this poem from Denise Levertov. I'm not going to go through the poem, although you'll have the slides where you can. But this is understanding. I'm going to go back to this. As we have familiarity with the elements of different forms and instruments, we can appreciate better. Again, if he hadn't shown me and walked me through this poem, I probably wouldn't have gotten the same things that I got out of it. But we can see that poetry uses a shakeup of sentence structure. So as it starts to come to its climax, the sentence structure changes, heavier punctuation is used, white space and indentation are used to grab attention, to call attention to these pinnacle points of the piece of this medium. Here's one more. When we talk about not being exploited, Megan, one of the media forms, one of the mediums that can exploit, that can manipulate, is of course advertising. I won't go through the details here, but we've all seen the difference in cereal boxes, and that's actually one of the goose chase activities. These stats, I will actually walk through this really quickly, that even though food companies are more geared toward, they are more aware of and interested in health foods, they still spend 8 out of every $10 of advertising funds on junk. And that increases for minority populations. So we've really got to be careful and help those who care about be careful. Have you ever done the couponing thing? That was a big thing like a decade ago. I don't know if it still is, but coupons can be very manipulative with that. Buy this now, you're going to save money, when actually you might be spending more on a product that is new that they're trying to promote, or again, getting more processed junk food, as opposed to, you aren't going to see a coupon for a clump of, a cluster, what do they call it? Of kale, you don't get coupons in the mail for kale. It's usually for other products. So we have lots of different goose chase activities that can help you engage with your family about being more conscious consumers. So how can we build this ability to pause, to, as Viktor Frankl says, to create that space between stimulus and response? We've talked about noticing our emotions, that's one of our power tools. Awareness is one of our power tools. And media literacy, I hope that when we leave here, we can think about it as kind of an adventure. We can build curiosity and critical thinking skills with the pause. So pause and ask questions is, now we're getting to the simple core principles. If you don't remember anything today, just remember, okay, I want to be more media literate. If I want to be more media literate, I can pause, kind of check in with myself and ask questions. I'm calling this PAC. Pause and ask questions. And you're going to find different models out there. We just wanted to use questions that are already taught. Who, what, where, when, why, how. I don't know if you had, maybe it was just me, but this is something I think I learned in elementary school, enough that it just kind of rolls off my tongue. Sometimes you see the order switched up, but okay, pause and ask questions. Remember to ask about who, what, where, when, why, how. And you don't have to have any set list of questions, although again, some models will give you questions you can ask. But we just wanted to brainstorm a few examples of how we can use these simple questions in different ways. They can actually,
Michelle,
yeah, go ahead.
I love this because when it helps me to pause even more when I say, who's sending this message to me?
Yes.
What is the actual message? Because sometimes it seems like it's kind of hard to get to the heart of the message. And when have they sent this to me? Am I bored? Am I tired? When I'm receiving this message, where am I? Am I on the, aisle to get cereal? And it's just devastating.
Or did I go to the
take
store to get kale and I ended up in the cereal aisle?
Yeah. And why did I bring my grandchild with me? So if I really just wanted to come and get kale at the grocery store, but no, why has somebody sent this message to me? And how have they made this message attractive or interesting, or that it stays in my mind, or that I keep thinking about it? So all of these are such simple ways for us to remember to analyze the nuances of messages.
Exactly. And in fact, that's what the following slides are about. We don't even really need to go through, because you've just summarized how we can use this, and we can form our own questions, just remembering these basic key questions. I'd also like to add that we can use them for our start with the center and revisiting our center. Who do I want to be? What do I want to be about? When do I want to be engaging with media? We've talked about the downsides, for example, of starting or ending the day with news, and the emotional and mental risk, and sometimes physical risk of engaging at times that probably aren't ideal. Where am I when I engage? Am I where I want to be? Are my feet where I want them to be? Is my mind where I want it to be? What's my why? And how do I want to show up in the world? So these questions can relate to any facet of where media literacy falls, at that center or engaging with media coming at us. So to Jan's point, and because we've had some great discussion, I always go through and sort of time. I get the general time, but I never know how long our discussions are going to be. So I adjust accordingly. But we can turn this into an adventure anytime we're engaging media. I wanted to add that we can do this. I mean, if you have children, you've already done this. You're asking them, well, who's the main character? What are they thinking? And why do you think they did that? Or what would you want to do if you were in their shoes? Conversations around any kind of media can also invite children to learn vicariously. They don't have to experience everything themselves. They can learn through other people's experience through engaging with different forms of media. So to Jan's point, we can take any one of these words and come up with different questions about the content itself and about the impact it has on us. So who created this? Who's it for? Who's being left out? Who isn't being represented? Who should be represented? Who does this content make me want to be? Does that match? Does that bring an integrity to my center? And you could, this would be a great exercise to do with your family and friends. The what methods do they use? What message are they portraying? What senses in the self-reflection? What senses are, what's being elicited? What's being ignited inside of me? What's going on inside of me? Taking that moment to do the check-in. And again, what might I want to do with it? Does that align with who I want to be? Does that align with my values? The when, like you said, Jan, we can reflect on when am I engaging? Am I tired? And wow, our internal weather can, like we've talked about before, can impact our experience with media. We can also look at when it was created. I don't know if you've ever had this experience where you reshare something and then you go back and look like, oh, that's like 5 years old. And it may or may not be relevant anymore. We can be careful in looking at, and we have the flip side when we talk about core media, that discussion with my son, that there are some media that are timeless. There are some messages that are timeless. And so the when can also show patterns. Well, if it showed up in 50 AD or in ancient Greece, and the messages are still showing up now, maybe that's something to make sure is assimilated in more of my core, because these are timeless truths. So the when can apply there as well. Where, Jan's already reflected some of this. We can also look at where the media are placed. Was it put in my mailbox? Was it put in my feed? Is it right at the beginning of my favorite show? Is it interjected in the middle of one of my favorite video series on YouTube? We can see where and how and when messages are shared with us. And of course, asking the potential why. Trying to, we can't know for sure what someone's thinking when they create a message, but we can imagine, we can try to think about different possibilities about that why. And again, reflect on our own why and how. Reflect on their why and how, and reflect on how it matches with our why and how. We can also use the same questions for creating media. Whom do I want to reach? What do I want to say? Is this an appropriate time? Is this a tactful time? Is the timing good? Where might it be appropriate? I'm coming to understand in thinking about different tools too. Like maybe it's better to share this not on my personal wall, but on Epic's wall instead. Trying to find the right where. And being sure that we're plugged in with our own why and how when we're creating content, so that what we're putting out there can be constructive. This is another simple little tool for that content creation piece. How we use our voice through media. Is it true? Is it helpful? Is it inspiring? Is it necessary? Sometimes, I don't know if you've experienced this, but sometimes I want to just get a thought out there. Like, is it really necessary? Did you really need to say that? And is it kind? What are we adding to the world? I've shared this research before, but kind of ties everything back together to invite us to reflect on who we want to be, what we want to be about, how we want to show up in the world. That as we become more alert and aware, we can impact as we impact our own lives and try to take responsibility for our own lives, we can impact people 3 degrees out, people we may not even know. So here is the invitation. Before I go to the invitation, do any of you have any final thoughts or insights? Things that kind of sparked sparked something in you today? What might you take home today? And maybe, we've been talking throughout, so you've probably touched on some of these ideas already. But I just wanted to be sure we had space for any final thoughts before I conclude.
Michelle, I am always impressed with the story of you and Beauty Redefined and how that impacted your ability to see media literacy and help your teenage daughters.
Would you like me just to share briefly about?
Yeah.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
It was, I think it was in 2010 or 2011. So my children were teenaged, and I got to do an interview with the founders of Beauty Redefined. And that was the first time I can remember hearing the term media literacy. Their focus is specifically on, Megan, to your point, preventing and helping raise awareness of the manipulative and exploitive nature of media around beauty ideals, messages about what it means to be beautiful, and how it can impact body image, create, influence mental health, body dysmorphia, eating disorders, unhealthy comparison, these kinds of things. Since that experience, as a side note, I've also learned that 1 of 4 boys these days is dealing with eating disorders of some sort. So this is not just for women, but this was my first introduction to the concept of media literacy as a field of study. And it changed my parenting. I think I was already, I was an engaged mom. I was always talking about, what are you seeing? What do you see this? As we drive, I was teaching them principles of driving when they were little, hey, look, there's that sign, trying to help them become more literate about their world. But I didn't know there was a name for it. For me, learning the technical name of media literacy helped me feel even more empowered because I could learn more about it. And I felt like it helped me be a more deliberate mom. So it's a field that I feel really passionate about, and I'm really excited to be able to fold into our digital wellness model. It was something that was not brought up in the model on which we were trained, and we felt like it was important enough to reflect it 3 different times in our model. So, and we're so grateful to my Discovery Destination for helping us turn this into a goose chase hunt, a mission that has multiple activities that families can do. We're in beta mode. We have a lot more activities that we're going to add, but Shirley and I were able to participate in this year's Digital Citizenship Summit, and we presented about my Discovery Destination and family-oriented time and activities, which is also a protective factor in children's lives, to engage and learn together in a safe environment where you're receiving positive reinforcement and having opportunities to take the lead. What my Discovery Destination is doing in principle is built on very powerful principles and true principles. So we're excited to invite you this week as your challenge for the week to give this hunt a try with your families and try a few of the activities. Let us know if you have ideas for additional activities as you think about different facets of media literacy, and we'll continue to build on that hunt. And we have some exciting opportunities to bring this to a national and international audience and in other ways, following up on that Digit Summit, so that you can help us make this a stronger activity to be able to share. There's a real push for media literacy education in the schools. What we've seen over the years is that it's pretty hard to get that kind of change to happen, but we can do this in our own lives and in our own families. And that's EPIC's vision, is we want to be able to empower people, again, to make media literacy simple and accessible and easily practicable, so that we can all become more deliberate users and creators, consumers and creators of media. So that's our presentation for the day, our discussion for the day. Thank you for being with us and letting us share this concept that means so much to us. I hope you can sense some of the power of these principles.
Thank you,
Michelle?
Michelle. Oh, go ahead, Jen.
I just wanted to add quite a few years ago, when I was working with Deanna Lamson on White Ribbon Week, we were doing a lot of efforts in the schools and the elementary schools of developing programs for prevention and protection of kids against pornography. But one year we did this, we created a whole event around White Ribbon Week, which was called Media Detective. And of everything
Please,
we
can you
did,
see my screen, Jan?
Thank you. Yes, Media Detective. Of everything that we worked on, this had the most enthusiastic reception from the teachers and parents. They just had fun. So, my discovery destination doing these activities, this really can be fun, but it's not just fun, it's really informative for kids. Like you said, Michelle, who wants to be exploited? And just turning that switch on in a little child's mind or an adult or a youth's mind, nobody wants to be exploited. So
Indeed.
it's just be fun. So we've had, like Michelle said, a lot of interest in this area and continue to have. So thank you for letting us share it with you.
It's kind of fun that even in their program, they use that magnifying glass, let's turn it into an adventure of curiosity, and it can be fun. And I've put a link to this resource in the bonus materials, in fact, along with other media literacy resources.
Oh, good.
So,
okay.
thanks for bringing that up, Jen.
Awesome. Thanks. My discovery destination also has some, was talking about the goose chase hunt, the discovery hunt that we have collaborated with you on, Michelle. We've got some that are geared toward White Ribbon Week as well for schools. So yes, all about
multiple ribbon. You have for multiple ribbon weeks, right?
Yes, we do. Red and green as well. So yeah, it's a
media
lot of fun.
applies to all of those. Drug prevention, it really, mental health, it really can cross it's protective across multiple purposes.
Agreed. And that's what we're about, is all about preventative factors to protect kids and strengthen families. So thank you again. Next week is I'm sad, it's our last in the series. Can you believe it already?
I can't believe it.
Yeah. So we invite you to join us again next week. Again, we're going to thank the Bear River Health Department, Central Utah Public Health Department, and Davis County Health Department for the grants that have made this possible. And join us live if you can. If you can't, catch the replays, which usually get posted within 24 hours, pending any technological difficulties. So thank you, and we look forward to seeing you next week.
Thanks so much for letting us